We have a number of systems. Islam as a religion is also a system of law and politics, finances, education. It has advice and structure for family life, social life, and all sorts of things. And so the financial system is one that for women, because my talk here is about women, insists on the right of women to independent financial resources. An example of that is that when a woman and a man get married, and this is from 1400 years ago, that when they get married, a woman's property remains her property. It doesn't pass off into her husband. There isn't any expectation. Now, in some Muslim families today who live in the West, this isn't like this. But traditionally, there wasn't an expectation that she would share her money or give her money to her husband. Rather, her money is her money, belongs to her. Anything that she shares with the family is charity for her. Whereas in the structure for men, it's a responsibility for them to care for the family, not only their nuclear family, but also the more extended family, financially and materially. The Islamic system of education not only allows for the right to educational opportunity, but both secular and sacred educational opportunities. So one difference between Muslim and other peoples of other faiths in the structure of religious leadership, for example, is that traditionally Muslim religious leadership was based in scholarship. And that scholarship was accessible to men and women. Now, there are some exceptions to that in the past couple hundred years, especially during colonialism. But traditionally, the accessibility was important, and we see it and saw it historically in women scholars, in women that became scholars of religion and faith. There's a brand new encyclopedia, 43 volumes of just names and biographies of women scholars over the centuries. It has 12,000 names in it. These names and this sort of evidence that historically we had a lot of women that took advantage of the system of educational opportunity. And domestic systems, the Muslim family worldwide has been affected by, I would say, sort of the global June, what's her name? Cleaver, June Cleaver, is it June? The global June Cleaver thing. That traditionally, that wasn't the case. The domestic life originally in the system or the historic demonstration of domestic life was really a life around helping, where every member of the family worked in the house and worked to make the house a place of happy domesticity, if you will, where people, I mean, we have a number of stories of the Prophet, for example, or male companions who washed their clothes, made the bread, sewed their clothes, all these kinds of things that modern society has sort of labeled as woman's work. We're getting away from that a little bit now, but the Muslim communities around the world are very much affected by global culture and definitely do have a much more Western view now of nuclear families that didn't exist, 3, 4, 500 years ago, before colonialism, etc. The political system, Islamic political system, women have always had a right to political agency. The first caliph that was voted for in the way we understand voting was somebody named Ali. And when that vote happened, men and women voted. So the concept of voting for men and women, it was never an idea that only men could vote or only women could vote. That would be kind of a fun history to have, but we don't have it. So, and political agency also around leadership. I showed you Razia Sultan, who was a leader in India. Nana Asma, who was part of the leadership in West Africa. She wasn't the actual sultan, but she had a lot of leadership. And many other different women who carried political power and political authority. We have this, and even in modern days, we have Benazir Bhutto and people like this. Like, women have carried political leadership. And there have been people against them, but against their politics, not against their gender. Okay. Social system is also really important because life for women has changed a lot in the past, 150 years maybe? And it's really interesting because as I look from a sociological lens to women's lives across geographical and historical borders, I see that women have moved from very private lives to much more public participation, if we're looking at middle class and above. And interestingly, from the earliest days, there was always an emphasis on both a right to private life, but also a right and a responsibility to public participation. So these are some of the basic concepts of the systems. So now here we are at lived literacies. To me, what that means is, what does it mean to live as a Muslim woman? To live as a Muslim woman, it's actually really critical to have religious literacy. This is different than my personal experience as a Lutheran when I was young, and I know that that's anecdotal, but and it's different, I think, than the experiences of many women in different faiths around the world. What I mean by religious literacy here is that because the faith of Islam includes systems and laws around politics and economics and money and finance, it's really critical for women to have religious literacy, or very easily their rights can be taken away from them. And we've seen this happen many times, whether in the home or in community or in whole countries. And it's been the first thing to be taken away. When colonialists first went to Muslim countries, the first thing that they did was strip the possibility for religious literacy for men and women. But from women especially, it was very dangerous, because when women didn't have religious literacy, of course, that affected families and children. Financial literacy and general literacy, I mention them here because these are things that are really important and things that are considered part and parcel of what it means to be a believing woman. Because in Islamic thinking, there are two aspects of being a believer. To be a believer and a person who does good deeds. Okay? Now, those good deeds, in English, good deed sounds like, I'm going to do a good deed and now I'm not. I'm going to do a good deed and now I'm not. But actually in Arabic, what it means is like living a life of goodness. So everything I do is towards goodness. So there are categories of good deeds, and one of the greatest is charity. And you saw Fatima al-Fihri and that university, that was built out of her charity. Like, she inherited money from her father after her father died. And she and her sister, actually, they both built mosques and schools. But it's Fatima's that became famous. Her sister's is less famous, though it's still standing today. And so that financial literacy is really very important and has always been something important. And then general literacy, Islamic thinking around education never separated between the secular and the sacred. The secular was sacred because it was important to know math and science, I don't know, cooking, military strategy, farming, how to go on a ship, how to build a ship, all of these kinds of engineering, all of these things are important for us to live our lives. Humanities, sociology, they're important to live our lives. And because our life is connected to being a believer, all sciences become sacred. And so the emphasis of education historically has been a very strong emphasis in general. For women, it's been in the middle and upper classes. It has also been emphasized in the lower classes, as women across the world. Whenever there's poverty, there's a lack of education.